The basis of this series is what we learn from God's order of creation of man. God created Adam first so that Adam would know that first and foremost, he was God's person. God was to be first in his life. He came from God, was made by God, and was to live for God. Adam was to get his identity, his value, his purpose, and his fulfillment from his relationship with God. Next, Eve was created. Adam is now a partner. Eve, like Adam, is first and foremost God's person, not Adam's spouse. They're second in each other's lives. God is to be first in both. And then kids came, third of all, and these kids are in their lives behind God and themselves in their marriage. Their job as parents was to mature these children into adults, and then those kids would leave home, build their own lives, and raise their own families. The marriage was to be for a lifetime. The children at home were not. This morning, I want to talk to you about boundaries with people. If you're joining us, this is about the 11th or 12th message in this series. I'm not sure which. We've talked about boundaries in marriage. We've talked about boundaries with parents. We've talked about boundaries with children. Today's about boundaries with people. I want to begin with some opening thoughts. Number one, you are you. You are you. Boundaries define where you stop and where others begin. You were made by God and for God. You came from Him. One day you're going to stand before Him and give an account to Him for the life you lived. You're to be who you should be, no matter whether others are who they should be. You're to do what you should do, no matter if others do or don't do what they should do. You have the power to choose. You are you. You have the power over you. You can change your life. Now, of course, we're talking in our context with God's help, but even God isn't going to change you unless you want to change you. So you are you. Number two in your outline, they are them. They are them. Just as you are who you are, they are who they are. They are who they are, not who you wish them to be, and maybe not anywhere near who God wants them to be. They do what they do, not what you wish they did, not what God maybe wants them to do. They are them. You have no power over them. They have power over them. They can change themselves, but you cannot change who they are or what they do. Number three. Third of all, they are not you. They're not you. This was one of the hardest lessons for me to learn. I am an optimistic person. I changed. I believe people can change. I'll tell the truth, so I believe people will tell the truth. I'll listen to someone, so I think people will listen and really hear what I have to say. I'll reconsider my position if somebody gives me a good argument. So I believe that other people will reconsider their position if I have a good argument. You see, we think people are like us, and some are, but a whole lot aren't. And so our boundaries get violated because we're assuming that they are us. They are not us, they are them. They see the world as they see it, not as I wish they saw it. They do what they do, not what I may wish that they did. The fact that you're honest doesn't mean that they are. The fact that you're doing the right thing doesn't mean that they'll do the right thing. The fact that you wouldn't intentionally hurt someone does not mean that they would not intentionally hurt someone. They are not you, they are them. And them may be the opposite of you. My daughter Sarah has written a book that is such a great parallel to this boundary series. I've listed in your outline, at the end of your outline, there's a name of it there so you can find it if you'd like. It became the #1 new release on Amazon and the #2 bestseller on Amazon Books. I've read at least 30 emotional health books, probably closer to 50, I didn't go count. And this is as good as any I've read. Not because she's my daughter, because it's good. It's called Becoming a Toxic-Proof Person. If you like this series, you'd love this book. I'm going to use some quotes out of it today. The Toxic-Proof Person, listen, is not a Christian book for Christian people. It's an emotional health book for a global audience. Toxic people exist everywhere in our lives. Some of you have parents who are toxic. Some of you have kids. Some of you have married a toxic person or were married to a toxic person. Some of you work for one or with one. Some churches have toxic people. Some pastors are toxic pastors. They exist everywhere. If you read it, understand it's for a global audience, and don't miss the proverbial forest for a few trees. Now, here's why the boundary series is significant. One, we can only get life from God. I can't get it from you. You can't get it from me. And when we don't get it from Him, we try to get it from other people. We marry somebody thinking they'll do it for us. Well, after a while, they can't do it for us. We have children thinking they'll do it for us. Well, after a while, they don't do it for us. They do it to us, right? You know? And so they can't do it for us. You can't get life from other people, and they can't give you life. Boundaries is a part of what helps us understand that. Number two, we need boundaries to protect ourselves from people who seek to manipulate and use us. How many of you have been manipulated or used at least once? Let's see your hand. Oh, it happens all the time. Often, as we've seen, these are parents, children, associates. They may even be people that we consider to be friends. One of the things the book talks about is how toxic people use your best qualities against you. Listen closely. How did I get into this? I'm a good person. That's how you got into it. They knew what they were doing. You didn't know what you were doing. They knew they could use you because you were good. Your good didn't protect you. Your good made you vulnerable. See, here's your problem. You're kind, you're loving, you're forgiving, you're optimistic. You think people change. You want to give people another chance, right? Which makes you a sucker for a toxic person. They use people like you. They prey on your good. They take advantage of the good qualities in you. You didn't get into this mess because you were a bad person. You ended up in this mess because you were a good person. But you forgot that you were you, they were them, and they were not you. And that's how you got there. Now here's number three. Third reason we need boundaries is we need boundaries to protect ourselves from people who will harm us. Not everyone who uses us will harm us, but everyone who harms us will use us. The toxic person proof is primarily about these last two. These people that we need to protect ourselves from because they'll manipulate and use us, and these people who will actually harm us, who are abusive people. Have you ever had an encounter with a person where you were trying to be nice and do the right thing, and they turn it against you? You did the right thing, and yet when it was over, you felt like the bad guy. Come on. How many of you have been there and done that? That's what a toxic person does. You were nice. You were kind. You were giving. And before it's all said and done, you were the bad guy. Paul Cal wrote a book on this called No Good Deed Goes Unpunished. And so often that's exactly how it happens. It's a toxic encounter. It's a sick person making the well person think they're the sick person. It's the person doing the right thing or the wrong thing, making the person doing the right thing feel like they did the wrong thing. And they're experts at doing this. And why do they do it to you? Is it because you're not smart? No, it's because you're good. And you think they're you. You couldn't believe anybody would do that to you because you would never do that to anybody else. So you got to realize you're you, they're them, and they ain't you. If you don't do that, then you're a sitting duck for somebody who knows what they're doing. You might not know what you're doing, but they know what they're doing. Here's a quote from that book by a guy named George Simon. He wrote a book called Character Disturbance, and I'm quoting. I've concluded the main reason these predators are so successful in manipulating others. It lies not so much in their highly effective knowledge and use of manipulation tactics, but rather in the reluctance of normal individuals to make harsh judgments about others, or to trust their gut instincts about the kind of person they're probably dealing with. They don't attach enough significance to the fear they feel and the mistrust they feel. On top of it all, they're also often blinded by the notion promoted by traditional psychologists over the years that everyone is basically good, and most especially just like them underneath their wall of defenses. In other words, you're good, so you think everybody else is good. If they're not being good, they're just hurt or something. And if you'd be good to the person who's not doing good, they'd become good. Did you track with me on that? There's a Greek word for it. It just doesn't work. Why? Because you're you, they're them, they're not you. They're not you. So they allow themselves, back in the quote, to believe that a person will only behave badly when hurting or frightened or in some type of inner pain. Such beliefs allow them to be easily victimized by the truly heartless. You are you, they are them, they are not you. Now here's the fourth thing. They should not dictate your behavior. They should not dictate your behavior. How others behave towards you should not dictate how you behave toward them. How they relate to you reveals who they are. And when people tell you who they are, believe them. See, some people show us who they are, and who they are is not good, but we don't want to believe it. Red flags are flying everywhere, but we don't want to believe it. I'll tell you why here in a minute. How you relate to them reveals the kind of person you are. This is the epitome of what Jesus meant when he said, love your enemies. What's he saying? He's saying, you don't allow them to dictate how you relate to them. You relate to them on the basis of the kind of person you are, not reacting to the kind of person they are. The behavior of others should not dictate yours. And here's the fifth thing. God should determine your behavior. Now, as Christians, we'd all go, well, duh, of course he should. How you relate to other people should not be determined by their behavior, it's by yours. How they act should not determine how you act. What you say and do should be determined by God, who he wants you to be, what he wants you to do, and what you think he would want you to say. If how you react to others is dictated by how they treat you, then other people control you. We'll say that again. If how you relate to them is a result of how they treat you, then they're controlling you. If how you respond to others is determined by God, who he wants you to be, what he wants you to say and do, then your submission is to God, not to that person. To think about somebody controlling your life, for us, is kind of scary. Wouldn't you agree? You might be here today, you're not a Christian, and you're thinking, so God is supposed to be in control of the Christian's life? I don't know if I can trust anybody to do that. Remember this, God created you, God loves you, God knows what is best for you and wants what is best for you. He punished his son to forgive you of your sins and to make you his child. You were made to be like him, being who he made you to be and doing what he wants you to do. It makes you the real you. See, if you don't become who God made you to be, you never become you. You become some other person, some lesser version of yourself. Now, I put two things here in your outline to bring clarity to what it means to allow God to control our lives. Number one, first of all, you'll feel in control when God is in control of your life. You won't feel out of control when he's in control. You'll feel in control when he's in control. When God's in control of your life, the real you, the best self, is in control. You don't feel bound in any way. You feel free. Why? Because you're you. You're the you were made to be. Number two, when your life is out of control, God is not in control. That's pretty obvious, isn't it? When God's not in control of your life, the wrong you, the lesser self, is in control. You're not free to be who you were made to be. Instead, you're being controlled by this lesser version of yourself that you were not made to be. You are you, they are them, they are not you. They should not dictate your behavior. God should determine your behavior. Number 6, you get to determine how people treat you. You get to determine how people treat you. It scares me how many people, especially women, don't understand this. Some think that other people get to decide how they get treated. In other words, any way anybody wants to treat you apparently is okay. That's not right. You get to determine how anybody treats you. Husband, wife, parent, child, pastor, boss, anybody. You have options. Now, the options may be tough. I'm going to have to quit my job to get away from this toxic boss, but you do have options. He does not have a right to treat you any way he wants to treat you, or she. You get to determine how people treat you. No one has the right to abuse or mistreat you. Not a friend, not a date, not a mate, not a sibling, not a parent, not a coach, not a teacher, not a pastor. Now, some of you might be thinking that Jesus doesn't agree with what I just said. Well, he just let people beat and crucify him. He sure did at the end of his journey. In fact, in John 12:27, he says he came for that very purpose. Listen, my soul has become troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this purpose, I came to this hour. Jesus avoided suffering all the way until he was arrested at the end. He couldn't avoid that suffering. He came for that suffering. So obviously he goes through with it. Subjecting yourself to the abuse of another person is not a sign of maturity, it's a sign of immaturity. Allowing somebody to treat you is not a sign of spiritual health and strength, it's a sign of emotional weakness. With that said, the way we protect ourselves from bad behaving people is by boundaries. Listen closely. The purpose of boundaries is not to change the other person, because there's a good chance you can't. The purpose of boundaries is to protect yourself and your family in cases. So I'll say that again. The purpose of boundaries is not to change the other person. The purpose of boundaries is to protect yourself. Remember, you can't change them. They are them. They are them. Now, there are more, but in your outline I put 3 ways, primary ways that people violate your boundaries. Number 1, first, some will try to smother you. They'll smother you. These are people who latch onto you and dominate your life. They get too close. They talk too much. They come over unannounced. They don't know where their life ends and your life starts. They try to prevent you from having a life apart from theirs. In fact, if you do something and they're not invited, you probably hide because you know they're going to get upset. That's a smothering relationship. You end up avoiding and hiding from them. Many of you had friends or people you dated who smothered you. Number 2, some will try to damage you. Some will try to damage you. These are people who verbally criticize and condemn you. They put you down so they can remain up. There are people, narcissists are like this, who actually feel better the more they make you feel worse. That's how they feel better, is making you feel worse. When you're down, they're up. And if you get up and outshine them, they got to bring you down because they've got to be the star of this show. Some people mistreat us, but we live in denial about the mistreatment because we so desperately don't want to believe that that's what they're doing to us. In other words, people stay in abusive marriage for years and years. Why do they do that? In most cases, it's because they just cannot bring themselves to believe that this person is who he or she is and is doing to them what he or she has been doing for years. And we think if we'll be good, we can change them. If we'll love them, we can change them. If we'll do this, we can. If we pray, it'll change them. Listen, God doesn't change anybody against their will, does he? He didn't change me against my will. He didn't change you against your will. He won't change them against their will. So you can't necessarily pray them better. They're going to have to come to the point and decide who they're going to be. Here's another quote from the Toxic Proof Person book. The more emotionally connected you are to someone not being toxic, the more likely you are to miss the fact that they are. The biggest reason why a red flag isn't enough to grab our attention is that we don't want people we know and love to be toxic. No one wants a toxic mother, brother, boss, aunt, cousin, boyfriend, or wife. People miss the signs of toxicity because they really, really want the situation not to be toxic. They want the toxic person's words to be true. They were emotionally connected to the outcome, so they will ignore their observations. They're emotionally connected to having what they want, so they ignore the reality of what actually is. This is so profound. Everybody but us recognizes we're being mistreated. If you're in a situation where somebody's mistreating you, probably everybody else but you knows it. They're not emotionally connected to the outcome. Having a loving parent, having a healthy sibling, having a boyfriend, or having a marriage. Our emotional connection to the outcome blinds us to the truth. This is why people who marry, people marry others when people are telling them, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Red flags are flying everywhere, but we can't see them. Why? We're emotionally connected to the outcome. We want to be married. And we think that we can make them us. And we can't, and we don't. This is why children are allowed to continue to manipulate and abuse their parents, and parents their children. Why? Because nobody wants to admit the truth. My child is a toxic person who uses me and manipulates me. My mother or father is a toxic parent. They use and manipulate me. They're not good people. And because I can't dare go there emotionally, then I'll just deny that any of those problems actually exist. The truth of who that friend, date, mate, parent, or child really is too painful to admit, so we keep lying to ourselves and believing our lies. Some will smother you, some will damage you, and then some will try to control you. How will they do this? I've given you 6 ways in your outline. Number 1 is finances. These are usually parents who hang money over their kid's head. Remember that I can go change my will and take you out of it. If they say that, what you ought to do is be a grown man and woman and say, you know, mother, if that's what you'd like to do, that's fine. But that doesn't change how you get to treat me or my husband or my children or whoever. Number 2 is gifts. Gifts are completely appropriate unless they have strings attached. Well, you owe me this. Remember, I gave you that. The 3rd is neediness. These people act pitiful. They hook you in with all their problems, and they are world class at having problems. Don't worry about me. I'll make it somehow. Everybody Loves Raymond, Marie Barone is the classic picture of this. And very few times in the whole series when her son stood up to her, she would get pitiful and limp out of the room as an old lady. Just working them. Say, how old do you have to be to learn how to work your parents? 2. Maybe less. 2. When I pout, when I pitch a fit, when I do the collapso, fall on the floor and triple my body weight. When I do all those things, mom and dad do what I want them to do. This is like magic. And the problem is now they're 55 and they're still doing it to you. And you're giving them money. And they're living with you. Neediness. Well, don't worry about me. I'll make it somehow. You know, maybe Biden will send me another stimulus check. Number 4 is time. These are people who smother you and control your time. It may be a friend, a parent, a child, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a boss, that they expect your life to revolve around theirs. Your life is to revolve around the Lord. You're not to fit God into your life with them. You're to fit them into your life with the Lord. The 5th one's threats. I'll take you out of my will. Here's a good one. I'll kill myself and it'll be your fault. How many of you have heard that? Somebody told you that. A bunch of you. I'll kill myself and it'll be your fault. It's not your fault. If they say that, say, you know what? I can't keep you from killing yourself. And if you do go kill yourself, it'll be your choice. It will not be my fault. And I'll be sad you did it, but I will have no guilt. Are we clear? That's called emotional maturity, guys. And you can't be spiritually mature without being emotionally mature. Spiritual maturity is not knowing a bunch of Bible verses. All kinds of people know Bible verses, they don't live at all. Spiritual maturity is not being able to do Jesus talk. All kinds of people do Jesus talk who don't do Jesus walk. Am I in the right room? course I do. Years ago, there was a lady who was finally leaving her abusive husband, who claimed to be a Christian, who most everyone considered to be a Christian. When she told him she was leaving him, he told her if she did, he would kill her. He would kill her. This is a true story. Sidebar, listen closely. You might want to write this down. If someone threatens to kill themselves, they're not good relationship material. Write that down somewhere, especially you girls. If someone threatens to kill themselves, they're not good relationship material. Get as far away from that person as you possibly can and stay there. They might get mad and kill you if they're stupid enough to kill themselves. Now here's the sixth one, pouting. Some will manipulate you with their pouting. They'll just emotionally, verbally, possibly physically shut down and punish you. They just won't talk. What's wrong? Nothing. Come on, something's wrong. Nothing. Well, I know something's wrong. Tell me what it is. Nothing. What did I do? Nothing. You understand you're being punished? You clearly have done something, or they think you've done something, but they're just punishing you now. They know what they're doing. You need to know what they're doing. They say nothing, say, well, good. I thought maybe I'd done something. And go on about your life. Watch them. They'll exponentially pump up the pouting at that point. Listen closely. They are not always hurting people who need to be loved and healed. Sometimes they're bad people who know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. They're playing you like the proverbial fiddle. Now turn your outline over and let's look at what some truths that set us free. I'm going to clip through these pretty quick. Number one, first of all, you're responsible to God for yourself. Romans 14:12, each one of us will give an account of himself to God. You won't give an account of anybody else, just you. Number two, you're responsible to God for your family. 1 Timothy 5:8 says, if anyone does not provide for his own, especially for his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. That's pretty bad, isn't it? In Ephesians 5:21-6:4, we see a list of responsibilities that families members have to each other. In a marriage, they're to serve each other, love each other, show respect to each other. Parents are to raise their kids in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. In 1 Corinthians 7:2-5, it talks real clearly about a husband and wife's physical duties to each other. Yes, it's in the Bible. You're responsible to God for your family. Number three, God may give you responsibility to others, but he will not give you responsibility for others. And I'm talking about not your people who aren't your minor kids. He may give you responsibility to others, but not for them. I'm responsible for me. You're responsible for you. My problems are mine to solve. Your problems are yours to solve. My problems aren't yours. Yours aren't mine. You're not responsible for other people's problems. But God may want you to do something for someone else concerning their problems. And when he does, and he definitely will, you now have a God-given responsibility to that person, but not for that person. The problem is still theirs. It is not yours. And listen closely. It's not your job to solve their problem. It's your job to help them solve their problem. Did you get that? It's not your job to solve their problem. It's your job, if God leads you to do so, to help them solve their problem. If you help them solve their problem, they might know how to solve the next problem they have. If you solve their problem, you haven't solved their problem. You've just created the next problem. Because what they know is if I have a problem, I can go to Rocky, I can go to so-and-so, and they'll solve my problem. Look at Proverbs 14:31. He who oppresses the poor taunts his maker. In other words, it's a bad thing. But he who is gracious to the needy honors him, honors the Lord. We honor the Lord when we help those who are in need. Now listen closely. In the Bible, people are in need who are those who are trying their best to help themselves. In our day, there are many who are in need or who are doing little to nothing to help themselves, and they're expecting others to take responsibility to take care of them. Some think it's the government's job. Some think it's the church's job. Some of them will think it's your job. It's not your job. It's their job. Proverbs 19:17 says that when we give to the truly poor, we lend to the Lord and God will repay us. Ephesians 4:28 tells us that we're to work to earn more than we need so that we'll have to give to those who are working but have less than they need. In Luke 10:30-37, we have the story of the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan helped the man in need. He did not become responsible for the man. He did this much, and that's all he did. And when the much that he did was over, he was done. He didn't take the man home with him. All of this man's problems did not now become the Good Samaritan's problems to solve. You get it? He was responsible to do something that God led him to do for this man. He was not responsible for that man. And neither are you. In Matthew 25:40, Jesus said that when we do what we do for the least of these, we do it for him. So God's going to lead us to help people. We have a responsibility to do that when he leads us to do it. But we do not assume responsible for them. It's still their problems to fix, not ours. Now here's number 4. You cannot fix people. You cannot fix people. Probably 2 of the biggest problems in my life. I'm a slow learner. Luckily, I've lived long enough to be able to get it right. One was to come to believe that I am me and others are who they are. Because you can't imagine how many times I have thrown myself into black holes trying to rescue people because I thought they were me. Given a chance, they would make it. If somebody believed in them, they would make it. Somebody gave them a helping hand, they would make it. Everybody doesn't want to make it. I assumed everybody wanted to. Look at me. Tell the person beside you, you're looking at a stupid man. Go ahead and tell them. I think everybody will do everything they possibly can to have a great marriage. That makes me a stupid man. I think everybody will do everything, every Christian will do everything he possibly can to be everything God wants him to be. That makes me a stupid man. Because that just isn't true. And some of you know it well because you're one of the ones just like that. Just isn't true. And here's the other one. I think I can fix people. I've tried to save marriages. I about lost. The biggest fight, Betsy, that I ever had was over trying to help another couple make it. He was playing me. She was playing her. I got mad, and it's a true story. I've told it before. And I decided, I'm going to go to the beach and disappear, be a lifeguard, have that skin like an elephant, and just nobody know where it happened to me. I'm done with church. I'm done with all this mess. So I actually got my car and left. I went out Chapman Highway. I'm not sure why. I passed the old steakhouse and thought, boy, steak and shrimp would be good. And I pulled in, ate some, and went home. It saved me, helped me. Healing powers in that food. But you cannot imagine how many people over all these years of ministry I've tried to fix. And the truth is, I can't fix anybody, nor can you. I can't fix any marriage, nor can you. I can't fix a child, nor can you. I can't fix a parent, nor can you. I can give you tools to fix yourself. And that's what I do every Sunday. A lot of churches, you go to them, some of you are new here, you go to them, it's about how to get saved. This church is about how to be saved. How to be saved. You can't fix people. I wish I could. I can't. You wish you could. You can't. We don't have the power. I said earlier, they are who they are, not who you are. They do what they choose. With that in mind, look at these verses. Proverbs 21:2. Every man's way is right in his own eyes. Proverbs 12:15. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes. In other words, he thinks he's right and he's a fool. Judges 17:6 and 21:25 says every man did what was right in his own eyes. Let me tell you something. That's true. Everybody does what's right in their own eyes. The difference is what we see to be right is different than what they see to be right. Don't miss this. You see what's wrong in their lives and want to fix it. They don't think there's anything wrong with their lives, and they don't want anybody trying to fix them. Their way is right in their own eyes. Your love, listen ladies especially, and parents, your love cannot fix people. If love could fix people, wouldn't the whole world be fixed? Did you get that? The way God loves us, if love fixed people, wouldn't the whole world be fixed? Even God's love can't fix people who don't want to be fixed. And neither can yours. Listen to this, another quote from the book. By a lady named Jodi Picoult, I guess I'm saying that correctly. No matter how charming you are and how fiercely you love, you cannot turn a person into something she's not. And I have tried that and tried that and tried that and tried that. I thought everybody wanted to go where I was going. They didn't. I thought everybody would pay the price I was willing to price to have a great marriage. They wouldn't. I thought everybody would do whatever was required to have the kind of relationship with the Lord that I feel like I have. They didn't. They're not me. I'm not them. You can't take people where they don't want to go. You can't make them be who they don't want to be. You can't fix them. All you can do is escape or protect yourself. Now, number 5, you are not responsible for the irresponsibility of others. You're not responsible for the irresponsibility of others. On the basis of this next verse, I think it's actually a sin to assume responsibility for an irresponsible person. Look at 2 Thessalonians 3:10. If anyone is not willing to work, then he's not to eat. That's what God says. Well, he'll starve. I guess he will. I guess he will. Or he'll get so hungry, he'll decide there's a better way to live than this. You might not be willing to let him starve, but God is. And if you go help an irresponsible person take responsibility for their irresponsibility, you're working against God. And what you're doing, I think on the basis of this verse, is sin. Now be clear, Paul's not talking about a person unable to work. He's talking about somebody unwilling to work. It's a person who's doing what he can, but he's still having a hard time and should be helped. This is a person who isn't trying. The person who isn't trying should be helped. I mean, that's trying but isn't getting there should be helped. The person who isn't trying should not be helped. That person will never take responsibility for his or his own life as long as someone else, friend, date, mate, parent, child, or church will. Why should they change? They're getting what they want. You say, but they're living on the street. Well, you may not want to live there. Doesn't mean they don't. Having a house and bills and all that stuff is kind of called responsibility, isn't it? And some people would rather not have the roof over their head and not have the responsibility. Now, a lot of people on the street are mentally ill, no question about that. But a lot of people really mess their lives up, obviously. But there are a lot of people, they just don't want the responsibility that you have. 2 things in your outline about helping others. Number 1, never give money to people who mismanage money. Never give money to people who mismanage money. If they threw away their money, guess what they're going to do with yours? They're going to throw it away too. People who mismanage money don't have a money problem. They've got a management problem. Then, number 2, never work harder at helping someone than that person is working to help himself. I'll help you, but here's what you're going to have to do. In fact, if you help somebody, here's what you do. You set the rules. If I'm going to help you, I'm going to set the rules. I'm going to tell you what to do, when to do it, and you'll do it as I tell you to do it, and the day you don't do it, I'll quit doing what I'm doing for you. Fair enough? It's the golden rule. You got the gold, you set the rules. Years ago, I helped someone out of his financial mess. I had him get a second job. It was an early morning newspaper route. I actually wrecked a car one morning and fell asleep on it. I actually had his checkbook. He would come to my office. I would tell him who to write checks to for how much and when. I gave him an allowance. He did what I said to do, and finally I got him out of his hole. Never work harder at helping someone than they're willing to work at helping themselves. If you're trying to help and the other person won't play by your rules, don't play. Don't play. Number 6. Allowing others to reap what they've sown is the most responsible thing to do for an irresponsible person. Allowing others to reap what they've sown is the most responsible thing to do for an irresponsible person. Look at Proverbs 19:19. A man of great anger will bear his penalty. If you rescue him, you'll only have to do it again. That's primarily about anger, but there's another principle there. It's the same principle. It's true for people who mess their lives up. It's a child who keeps getting in trouble at school or with the law. If the parent or child, it's the parent or child who goes from one financial crisis to another. Rescue them and 2 things will be true. 1, you'll get to do it again and again and again. 2, they'll never change. Why should they? But they just don't know what they're doing. Oh, they know what they're doing. You don't know what you're doing. They know what they're doing. People change for 3 reasons. Some change because they're always looking to. They want to grow. All growth requires change. All change doesn't result in growth. But if you're ever going to grow, you got to change something. If you always do what you've always done, you always get what you always got. So the only way I can be more than I am is to be something different than I now am. Make sense? So some people change because they want to. They're always looking. What can I do to have better marriage? What can I do to be better in my career? What can I do to be a better dad? Whatever else it might be. The second category is that some people never change. Now, some of you are going to get all spiritual and say, well, can't God change everybody? The answer is God could change everybody. Obviously, he doesn't, right? He lets us change ourselves, and a lot of people don't change at all. That's reality. And then there's the third category, and these are the people who only change when the pain of not changing becomes greater than the pain of changing. In other words, to change is going to cost me something, but it ain't going to cost me nearly as much as not changing is costing me. So that's why people do. Rescuing that person keeps them from suffering the kind of pain that could lead to change. One of the greatest and best known stories in the Bible is that of the prodigal son. You find it in Luke 15:11-32. In this story, the prodigal son represents a wayward sinner, a guy who's not doing the right thing. And the father in the story represents God. Don't miss that. Because whatever he's about to do with his child is perfect. It's wise, it's smart, it's intelligent, it's right, it's perfect. So whatever he did, we ought to do. The son takes his inheritance early, which was legal. Before long, he's mismanaged his life and blown all of his money. He ends up getting a job feeding pigs. You know, Jews don't eat pigs, have nothing to do with pigs. I'd probably make a bad Jew, but anyway, that's another story. Here in the South, he's now feeding pigs. In the South, we call that slopping hogs. How many of you heard that one, slopping hogs? This is the most humiliating thing on the planet this son could be doing. And it gets so bad that before long, he's not only slopping the hogs, he's eating the slop. It's not in the text, but surely the father's being told about the horrific conditions that his son's living in. Surely somebody there knows where he's from, and word's gotten back to the father of what's going on with his son. But he does nothing to rescue his son. He allows the son to reap what he's sown. Those who know the father and about the son probably criticize and condemn the father for not rescuing his son. Emotionally immature and inexperienced people will criticize you if you don't rescue your son or daughter or parent. Unhealthy people will all think you're the bad person. Why don't you go rescue them? And the reason you won't go do it, you shouldn't go do it, is because you're trying to be like the father in the story who's perfect, who's doing it right. The father does nothing. What kind of father are you? Don't you love your son? The father does nothing. In our day, it'd come across like this. And you call yourself a Christian? How many of you had somebody pull that one on you? And you call yourself a Christian? And the father does nothing. Why? Because he's brilliant. Eventually, the son hits the proverbial bottom of the barrel. The pain of how he's living has become the pain that has become greater than the pain of changing, which in his case is going back to his father and admitting his failure. Now, there are a lot of other lessons in this story, but here's the one for us today about loving your wayward child, parent, friend, or whoever. You love them by not rescuing them. Not rescuing them. The father knew the best thing he could do for his son was to allow him to reap what he had sown. To do this, listen, he had to care more about his son's future than he cared about his own reputation. Did you get that? That's why we don't do it. Somebody will think we're a bad person if we don't go rescue our son for the 10th time. Our parent, you send money to our parent for the 5th time. Or whatever for the umpth time. People will think badly of us. You got to care more about other people and their actual lives than you do about what people think about you. That's another sign of emotional maturity. As a parent, you got to care more about that child and who they are going to become someday than you care about how they feel about you, or than you care about how other people feel about how you're parenting that child. And if you don't do that, you're going to cave into that child. That child will always be the mess that he or she is. And rather than being a part of the solution, you just became a part of the problem. Because whatever they did, you rescued them. You rescued them. You rescued them. And you get to do it again and again and again and again. But if you don't rescue them, they might get tired of the bottom of that. They might get tired of slopping hogs. They might decide, surely there's a better way to live than this. Allowing others to reap what they've sown is the most responsible thing you can do sometimes for an irresponsible person.